My name's Pam Isherwood, and I moved to Seven Sisters in 2001 from Islington before. And I live pretty well bang opposite the market. I live in what's known as the Page Green area, and that stretches from the little green on Broad Lane, which contains the 7 trees that constitute the Seven Sisters historic kind of site. And it stretches from there down along the length of the high road to the railway bridge for South Tottenham Station. And it's a group of about 7 roads with 500 odd dwellings in. Mostly, there's about 300 houses there. Most of them are 2- and 3-storey Edwardian and Victorian houses. I'm a photographer, except no one pays me anymore. And before that, I was a lecturer. And where are we? What the Residents' Association does is it's very sporadic. We tend to react to particular circumstances, but we've done things like try to clean up the local park, bring in new flower beds. We've had a sort of street party. We're involved with the Neighbourhood Watch, and we kind of keep an eye on planning and things like illegal conversions in backyards. We found there were people living in tents in one garden, for example. So we get quite engaged with those kind of things. We were pretty well, everyone in the area was united against the huge development at Apex House, and that was very galvanising. We also worked in that with the people from the Stonebridge estate, which is the ones immediately below where Apex is going to be, and Seacole House, which is a sheltered housing development adjacent to what was the Community Services Building. So we ally as a residents' association with some of the other local ones. It's a very loose organisation. I mean, like many of these things, it tends to react to particular events. And we mostly communicate by email. It's an email list, essentially, so we send warnings round when things are happening and so on. I'm also a part of Ward's Corner Community Coalition, which again is the most loosest thing ever, but I'll come back to that in a minute. And like everyone there, all of us want to see change in the area. We are absolutely not resistant to change. This is what we're constantly accused of, and of being sentimental and so on. No, we want to see change, but we don't see the only possible means of change is not just demolition. There are plenty of different ways of changing areas. And the Ward's Corner site in particular has been subject to what we can only see as very deliberate dereliction over the years. It's a classic strategy of developers to let things get so scruffy, it seems the only solution is to pull it down. But there is what seems to be criminal effect of where there's 2,500 square metres of really essential retail space that's been left empty for 43 years. And Sue will come on to some of the discussions about that in a minute, Ms. Penny. There's been other examples of this dereliction in the borough, especially around Spurs, where huge areas were deliberately left to decay, which let Spurs then go ahead with their plans for the stadium. There's been many, many, many requests to use that building over the years. And again, Ms. Penny will extend those in a minute, including ours. For example, things like Granger bought the building where Inkwell the Printers is in Seven Sisters Road. And the printers moved out because, well, there was a whole long story there. I will leave that. And it just is, they could have actually been using that as a shop, and it's been left empty now for 13 years or so. And it looks really squalid. It makes the whole area look bad when you see tinned-up shops with just broken windows and things. When I moved here, I actually put the offer in on my flat in 2000. It took a year and a half to sort out the conveyancing, but that's another story again. But, it's 11 o'clock.
The fire drill,
yep,
fire alarm test, of course.
So in that time, I did a lot of kind of wandering around the area, seeing what I was getting myself into. And also, as you're supposed to do, coming at different times of day and different days of the week and so on, just to check out the area. And I did stick my head inside the market. This was in the early 2000s. And I immediately stuck it back out again because it seemed to be not a particularly welcoming place at the time. And then I bought my flat, and I was working flat out, so I kind of stopped my wandering so much. And then things started to get really interesting around the mid-2000s. And I got involved with I heard about what was going on, and I got involved in the coalition in 2008, when it had been going for a year or so. And one of the reasons I got into it was I was very intrigued by the idea of this coalition, because every group I'd been involved with before that had been very specific single issue things involving a particular group of people. But the coalition is quite fascinating and has actually been the subject of quite a lot of academic research, the way it all operates. And there's been, I think, 3 or 4 PhDs written about this campaign. Because the community plan seems to be the ideal solution to this situation, because it's based on cooperative principles to start with and throughout. I was able to get involved. As a photographer, I was able to do a lot of the photography work around the market and so on. And as I've got to know it more and more and more, I realised how incredibly important this place is and how coherent the market is as it stands. And I use it now as my second home. I've started picking up bits of Spanish, which, I think it's inevitable there. I find I can read Spanish quite easily, just because it's so similar in so many ways to English. But what the coalition includes, it includes the market traders, it includes the shopkeepers all around, it includes the residents in the flats above, like Emmett, it includes on the site itself, it also includes residents' associations across the borough, so from Page Green, Clyde area, Bruce Grove, the resident association within the island at Broad Lane and so on. It includes academics, it includes environment groups like Friends of the Earth, Sustainable Haringey, SAVE, and within that coalition we have many skills between us. Part of which illustrates the wealth of talent there is now living in and around Seven Sisters and South Tottenham. Some of those members of the coalition are not local, but they're supporting us from very many different places and so on. So we have the skills, so we have design skills, we have media skills, we've got filmmakers, publicity skills, people interested in the politics of food. And we've all somehow had to acquire the somewhat arcane planning skills involved in challenging a project like this and so on. Decision making is horizontal, so we don't have a hierarchy. And as you asked, Ms. Hazanawa, we have the membership of the group, the hardcore that's kept it running just in terms of keeping the admin going, has come down to half a dozen of us. But there's constantly people dipping in and out. But we don't have a legally constituted body. There is the West Green Road and Seven Sisters Development Trust, which is the legally constituted body that got the planning application through, which has 4 directors on the board and so on. So that's an ordinary trust-based company. And one of the things that's been crucial for us to do has been consultation, and I think we've made a rather better fist of it than Granger ever did. We've had many, many, many open meetings going through. When the Granger plan was put forward, the response of the coalition was to go, well, we don't think very much of your plan, but instead of just saying we don't want your plan, we've said, well, let's do a better one, which is what we proceeded to do. So we commissioned an architect whose name was Ricardo, and someone else will give me another name, but anyway, who drew up a plan for us very, very quickly to show the potential use of actually the whole Woods Corner site and how we could include housing within an extended development, not just the market, but all 4 streets and so on. We had a big public meeting at the College of North East London, which some 350 people came to. And that's, I think, as far as I know, that's the biggest public meeting that there's been in Tottenham since the 1985 riots. And we've also had many workshops, small ones, ongoing things. We go to all sorts of open events and so on. We go to community fairs, we go to summer schemes, etc. And we've done gigs at Chances, at Tottenham Chances, fundraising gigs, where we've brought musicians in and so on to help get the word out of what we're doing. We did a weekend workshop from the Glass House where we made kind of plasticine models of what we thought our scheme could look like and so on, which councillors came to and so on. We had one event in September 2008 where we brought all the ambassadors from Latin America that we could get into one room, some of whom probably hadn't spoken for a very long time. And so we were able to entertain these people. We had the ambassador of Spain, Cuba, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Brazil, Peru, and Chile. We're actually pretty good at communicating with wider communities. And consulting, so that we put our very quick instant plan in, and then we dropped that plan and proceeded to set about designing a real community plan. And so we did this masses and masses of consultation for years and years and years. And so everyone was able to input into the design. We asked people what they wanted to start with, and then proceeded to work out how we could produce that. So everyone, especially obviously the people on the site, were able to contribute to what they wanted in the design. And so the final plan we put through was passed in 2014 with the support from the council planning department. So I remember we went and had one meeting in River Park House with the head of planning at the time. We think that what happened, the way the Granger plan evolved, the area plan, the way that happened, seems to have been based a lot on ill-informed reputations about the area. And the thing that Lynn Gardner read out at the Ms. Gardner read out at the beginning of her presentation 2 weeks ago, describing this kind of slime pit full of crime that is Tottenham, that most of us were so deeply shocked by, seems to still be one way the area is perceived. And of course what's happening is partly, it is changing so fast, it's quite breathtaking. So her quote that, where it said, Tottenham suffers from some of the highest levels of deprivation in the UK, sits within the 20% most deprived areas in London, ranked by reference to income, crime, barriers to housing and services, health deprivation and disability. And statistics were based on the 2011 census. That's 6 years ago, and in that time things have shifted so fast as well. It's really different. And also that apparently 75% of households in Tottenham Green experience deprivation. Well, maybe I'm one of those. I just somehow managed to scrape by on my pension, so maybe I'm deprived. But the picture of who lives in Tottenham is changing very fast. And also Tottenham as a whole is very different from the area around Seven Sisters. Obviously the tube station being there makes a material difference to what the attraction of the area is. The market, as I said when I first moved here 17 years ago, had this very bad reputation, and we think that's what painted the picture that has produced the Granger plan, because they saw the market as being this centre of dereliction and bad things. And since then, of course, it's changed a lot. The first Colombians, I think, came in the early 2000s, and they've kind of turned the market into something totally different. It's not it's not a scary place to go to at all. Part of the setting up the picture of the area that Granger was able to use to say it only needs to be knocked down was, for example, Councillor Sheila Peacock, who was the chair of planning in 2008, was on record as saying that Seven Sisters Market, especially the Colombian part, was a source of drugs and crime, and that she couldn't wait for it to be razed to the ground. We challenged that as part of our appeal to the High Court. She was accused of bias, but was still allowed to chair the planning meeting where Granger got their planning permission. And Councillor Ray Dodds at that same meeting was the vice chair of planning, and he's on record as saying that Ward's Corner is a dump, was a dump, is a dump, and always will be a dump. And then he voted to pass the Granger plan. So this was the kind of perception from people who'd never been there of what Ward's Corner is like. Virtually all our attempts to work with the borough, apart from getting the planning permission through, have been blocked. So, for example, when the Prince's Heritage Trust wanted to work with us, they could only do so formally by working through the council, and the council just refused to actually have any connection with them at all. So they haven't worked with us. They've refused to work with us. In Page Green, I think there were many responses to the planned Apex development, and virtually all the responses from Page Green were objecting to Apex, apart from one, as I remember, and there were hundreds of them. And we got together and challenged we went through all the layers of challenge that we could, including eventually appealing to the mayor. We paid solicitors to advise us on what the process was, but all those things failed. So that is going to go ahead. It's doing absolutely nothing for the people in Page Green. It's going to be this extraordinarily huge building that's going to overshadow all of our houses. The shadow from Apex House in an evening will actually fall as far as the end of my road, several hundred yards along, because it's going to be so huge. And it's fat, it's not just tall, it's wide. We're going to be faced with all the disturbance from the building. The knocking down has happened already. But similarly, if Ward's Corner goes ahead, we're going to have 5 years of building work going on under our noses. And I'm sure that, I'm quite impressed by the demolition of Apex House. It's been done as discreetly as you can. But one of the things that is going to be involved with these big buildings is pile driving. And I remember living next door to a building site like that years ago, and the pile driving has got to dig 100-foot holes to build enough substantial foundations. And there's only one way to do that, which is to bang, and they bang, and they bang, and they bang for days and days on end. So we'll be stuck with that. Apex was just a rumour, in fact, when the Granger plan went through. So the Granger got planning permission in 2012 for their scheme. And there was vague ideas that the Apex site would be used, but there was absolutely no suggestion of the massive scale that's been pushed through. And so we have this huge scheme of this totally out-of-place giant tower, 23 stories. And surely the fact that if that had been known when the Ward's Corner plan, when the Granger plan was looked at, in terms of housing, it makes a material difference to the plan for the area, because it's actually bringing in, twice as much housing onto the site. And so that kind of overall site of the thing has been put together in a very piecemeal way. So the plan was first to look at the Ward's Corner site, then it was to add on Apex. So we think that actually makes a huge difference to the way the area is seen in terms of the number of people and the demands on services and so on, as well as the effect it has on the people who already live here and work here. It wasn't in the 2003 framework to have an absolutely giant tower block there. There's going to be at least 350 new dwellings coming to this site. And probably because Granger's also got their eyes on Seacole House, which is the sheltered housing next door. And there's an appendix to their plan which shows how they can turn that into a 7-storey block as well. So I guess that's another 30 or 40 dwellings to add to the total. And as I asked of Mr. Kiddle earlier, that the fact that they're going to build a 23-storey tower with only one fire exit, they now have an opportunity to tweak those plans, I would have thought. Because who's going to want to sleep on the 23rd storey with one fire exit? I'm assured that the sprinklers would deal with that, but that must change the demand for those flats, I would have thought. I wouldn't want to sleep on the 23rd floor with one staircase as my only way out. The Granger plan to bring in high street shops, and it was quite funny because they originally said they wanted to bring in shops like Woolworths and Blockbuster and Jessop's, the photographers, and all those other famous high street shops, so BHS, all those ones that seem to have given up lately. But there's been loads of research by things like the New Economics Foundation, which shows that we're much better off with smaller shops generally. The money we spend, quote, the money we spend on the high street is more likely to leave the local area straight away, having less economic impact than spending in retailers with a localised supply chain. And Mary Portas, in her famous review done in 2011 of high street shops, and again things have got even worse since then, looked at the whole notion of the high street. She was commissioned by the Prime Minister to work for the Department of Business Innovation and Skills. I could go into her quotes, but I won't, but just basically saying that the old model of the high street is dead. I don't think the Granger is going to do anything to change that old model of the high street, especially on the frontage. That we need to have a mix, not just of retail, but also of other activities going on within the town centres. So, for example, things like cinemas, but also nurseries and libraries and so on need to be mixed in, and leisure needs to be part of the retail mix. They quote, they should be places where we get to engage with other people in our communities and where shopping is just one part of a rich mix of activities. And Mary Portas also quotes on indoor and outdoor markets. There's no shortage of entrepreneurial talent in the UK, but there have to be the opportunities and spaces to give this new talent a chance to develop and flourish. The innovation and creativity we have in this country is inspirational, but it isn't currently reflected in the high streets. And she says markets are a fantastic way to bring a town to life. I think we've easily established that in everything we've heard so far. We've said, I will say it again, that the inequality at this inquiry between that side of the room and this side of the room is blatant, that appearing at this CPO tribunal is expensive to us, partly the cost of our legal support and so on, and the difference in access to funds makes this whole procedure really, really unfair for us. Granger are worth something like 2.8 billion, their bottom line, I believe, from their last annual report, and they're the largest housing rental company in the country. So they can draw on all that wealth and knowledge. And the council have access to funds coming from our council tax payments. So we don't have a level playing field here. We're doing what we can, but we obviously, if we could afford Granger's QCs, I'm sure we'd be doing a different job altogether. I would like to just wave a couple of things around. Part of what we did with one of our consultations, we did a lot of work with the Open University and with a strange organisation called Sticky World, where they put together a kind of weird 3D model of the site and so on. And this was one of the leaflets we put out, that we put through, I think, about 5,000 copies of this leaflet out and around the area. As part of engaging with people, and this is a kind of illustration of the community plan. And we also, this is one of the leaflets that we did, and if you'll indulge me, I'd just like to pick out the key points on this leaflet, which was to say that what we want to do is restoration forwards. Which we thought was a rather good pun. We have got someone from Saatchi who works with us, so our little PR volunteer is really useful.
Do you have a copy to
I've got one copy on me. I can leave that with you, of course. And so our strapline, I think we call those things, is the idea of the regeneration of Ward's Corner within 2 years with community inclusion at its heart. So that's our USP, I think. And so some of the projections of what our scheme could look like, but this is the difference between the Ward's Corner plan and other plans. So it's a viable and sustainable proposal. It will bring us regeneration within 2 years, which is quicker than Granger's Seven Sisters regeneration plan, which will take over 5 years. It's a community-led project. It includes the restoration of our heritage buildings. It protects existing lives and livelihoods. It creates a cultural destination. It provides jobs and training for local people. We would hope to work with the college, for example. It will boost the local economy. It includes affordable business spaces. It respects the conservation area. It retains human-scale buildings. It will improve the public realm. It is no threat to London Underground's infrastructure at Seven Sisters Station, which of course Granger endangers. It will involve minimal disruption during implementation, and it has massive public support. So I think that's all I need to say at this point. This was made in 2008, and it was the BBC came. They have been back since, but this was the quite nice one. As I say, it runs for about 9 minutes, and it was from the BBC's Inside Out team, which is the local news station. And I think that the presenter puts across very nicely a lot of people's reactions when they actually find the Seven Sisters Market. It's about the Seven Sisters Market more than anything. Nothing much has changed. I mean, there's a few new faces, and old faces have gone. But this was from a few years ago. Thank you.
Borough, Petticoat Lane, Columbia Road. I suppose most of them have got some kind of speciality or niche, whether it be flowers or food or bric-a-brac. But I had no idea that tucked away in a corner of North London was a thriving market that's brought a slice of Latin America to Seven Sisters.
Rápidamente aparece bien Michael Owen, entrega balón cortico para David Beckham.
Al cantante más grande queda un país latino, para ti, yo canto en mi querido, para ti, yo canto en mi querido, para ti.
Seven Sisters Indoor Market is like a mini United Nations in action. There are traders here from as far away as Uganda and Jamaica. Muslims work alongside Jews. There are butchers and bankers. But by far the largest section of the market caters to Latin American tastes. And as far as I know, that makes this place unique, the focal point of a minority community, the kind of model of ethnic diversity that everyone from the mayor down says we should aspire to. So what's the local council going to do to this place? I'll tell you, it's going to knock it down. Although the final decision is still pending, everyone at the market fears the worst.
What I'm going to do on my Saturdays.
I think this market is really important for the Latin people.
Where I'm going to do my hair.
Inside here, it's like there's magic in here.
It's the end of our income in our house.
The place shouldn't be closed, because this place unites a lot of people.
The site above Seven Sisters Tube Station is known as Ward's Corner. It centres around a derelict department store. The developers want to build 200 residential units and over 40,000 square feet of retail space for big high street names like M&S and Woolies. But first, the whole block has to come down, reducing the Latin market to rubble.
This one is £8 a kilo for you.
The market is packed with red-blooded characters like Manuel, the Colombian butcher, and part-time footy commentator.
Inglaterra 1, Argentina 0.
And a few doors along, Robinson, the one-legged cycling champion. I don't want to interrupt, but what is going on here? This is work or this is dancing? Salsa.
Happy.
But one leg is no obstacle for this guy. He has 6 international medals for his country, whom he also represented at the Athens Paralympics. You move very well for a guy with one leg.
I don't need more.
Robinson only opened his tiny shop selling top-of-the-range competition bikes 3 weeks ago. He simply doesn't accept the market could be shut down. So you really like the place?
Yeah, I like.
You'd be sad if the council closed it? That would be a sad day.
No, it's not good for many people.
And next door, I find a Ugandan estate agent, like you do. You've got the maddest bicycle man in the world next door to you.
He's a very good man. He's a champion.
Yeah.
He's a champion. He always makes me laugh here. These people, they're like brothers and sisters. Inside here, it's like there's magic in here.
Do you think Seven Sisters needs a Marks and Spencer's? Would it benefit the area?
Marks and Spencer should stay where they belong. And this business that unites everybody should also exist.
At the back of the market, I meet cafe owner Fabian, who was badly injured in one of the 7/7 tube bombings.
Me going on the side of the train going, y the moment one explosion, big explosion. The problem for the ear, so the ear finished.
Fabian is now deaf in one ear, suffers psychological problems, and has endured 5 operations to save his leg. So keeping busy is keeping Fabian healthy.
When he's busy, he's healthy, very healthy. Yeah, when he's busy.
Every day coming the different people. Hey, Fabian, how are you? You okay? Yes, it's all right.
This shop for him, this small dishes market is very important for him.
I understand.
I mean, I say it's in the future, this market is closed. It's a big problem for him, for the family.
Quisiera como estar siempre así, ¿entendés? Relajado.
At the moment, have big troubles, mentally troubles, yeah, psychological troubles.
So Fabian. Thank you. Yeah, you okay?
Thank you.
You okay? Okay. So, no one inside the market wants the place to close, and it's a similar story out here, because the plan to demolish the site affects all the shops along here. Shops staffed by people from around the world that cater to literally every taste. And yet, according to the planning application, the shops and facilities in this area can be considered poor. Perhaps they mean the car wash at the back of the market.
If you destroy the market, it's no good.
Or Ginny's amazing wig emporium on the corner.
It's going to be a big problem for us.
Or the patriotic print shop festooned with St George's Cross bunting. Or this former Woolworths, which is now a supermarket of specialist foods from all over the world. You've got palm oil, not just Nigerian palm oil, but we've got Sierra Leonean palm oil and Ghanaian palm oil. What have we got here? Ram goat soup, Manish water. That's maybe for me. I'm not so sure about that one there.
From Africa.
Yes. OK, it's not quite a revolution, but opposition to the redevelopment plans has brought together disparate groups of people. There are Colombian stallholders, Asian corner shopkeepers, white middle-class residents, black cafe owners. They call themselves the Ward's Corner Community Coalition, and they want to be heard.
Everybody!
The coalition has organised a series of protests, including this human chain around the site. And politicians seem to be listening. Boris Johnson, seen here visiting the market during his mayoral campaign, has appealed to Haringey Council to stop the proposed demolition. But currently, the wrecking ball still hangs over the entire site. We asked Haringey Council for an interview, but were turned down. We also approached the developers, Granger plc, who declined to be interviewed, but they did give us this statement.
We are currently considering how best to respond to the Mayor's comments on the application, and this involves a considerable amount of technical work.
Despite the conciliatory words, it's hard to see how a compromise can be struck between the developers, who are hell-bent on demolition, and the coalition, who want the site developed in a more organic way.
What we really want is small start-up shops for small businesses that will be different. We can't party at W.H. Smith's like we can party with the Latin Americans. I mean, they just don't do it.
That is undoubtedly true.
It is.
Friday evening, and Lita, who owns the cafe at the front of the market, is getting the party started. The atmosphere is literally smoking. What has brought so many Latin people to Seven Sisters to here?
The emotion, the music, and the people are very good, very hospitality, basically, and also the beauty of the women here as well.
I had noticed.
It's not only Latinos, everybody. It's one heart.
Everybody together, one heart.
Yes.
I like that. I tell you what, I love markets, but I have never been anywhere like this before in my life, hand on heart. It's amazing people with amazing stories. There's an astonishing range of stuff to buy. It's a part of London I had no idea existed. But I tell you what, if it was to go, it'd be a tragedy.
Right, thank you very much, Ms. Isherwood. Anything else you want to add to what you've said at all now? Right, Mr. Corner or Mr. Bias, whoever. Good morning, Ms. Isherwood. I just have a couple of questions for you, if I might. Just to begin with, obviously, you are a strong supporter of the Seven Sisters market. One can tell that from all the questions you've asked during the inquiry and from the video and from the evidence you've just given. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. I don't actually buy much stuff there because I'm a vegetarian. So it kind of cuts out most of the cuisine for me.
So no Argentinian steaks for you then?
No attraction for me at all. But people are welcome if that's what they choose. Mine is a... Anyway.
Quite understand. I noticed, watched the video with interest. That's from 2008, I think you said. Is that right? And obviously the presenter makes... gives his opinion about the importance and diversity of the market. I notice, unless I've missed something, the video said nothing about the proposals to provide the market, re-provide the market within the new development. Am I right?
The replacement market was only brought in after Boris Johnson came to visit, and he then it was the day before his election on the 1st of May 2008 he came, and he then made the council bring in the S106 to replace the market. But Granger had no ideas at all about what the value of the market was when they put their plan together originally.
Well, we're now 9 years later, and you and the council, we know from the policies, share an opinion about the value of the market. Can I just ask you this? Things having moved on from when that film was made, if the Granger plan secures the future of the Seven Sisters market, you would see that as a benefit, wouldn't you?
In reality, does anyone actually believe that the market will survive two moves? into a new site where they will have absolutely no control over what's going on at all.
But if we've heard a lot of evidence, if you'll forgive me, I'm not going to go all the way back over that evidence. I just want your opinion. You've given evidence about the value of the market. If the inspector decides that we're right, that the new development will secure the future of the market, given the value you place on the market, you would regard that as a benefit of the scheme, wouldn't you?
Well, of course I want the market to survive. As I've said, I don't believe in, I don't know anyone else who actually believes it will survive. But the other thing is that the Granger development will do absolutely nothing about the rest of our community plan. So all the Granger plan has picked on is the market itself. They're not doing anything to support the other kind of regeneration that we can bring in our restoration plan, using the existing building that's there, that's already well known and that has this fantastic potential to provide a real proper town centre for the people of Tottenham.
Again, we've heard a lot of evidence. Sorry, just before we move on. So, I don't want to labour this, but can I take it that your answer to my first question then is you don't think the Granger plan will secure the future of the market, but if it did, you would accept that that was a benefit of the scheme? Am I right?
I want to see the market survive.
Right. Well, so I've made the point. I'm going to move on.
I think you've asked the same question 3 times there. I actually thought Ms Isherwood did say yes as part of her answer on the second occasion, although she qualified it.
Well, I didn't catch that, but thank you for reminding me that I've asked the same question 3 times. Ms Isherwood, one other point for you, please. You referred to the provision of housing in the area. And I notice that there were plans, you said, drawn up at an early stage, including housing, as part of a scheme for the Ward's Corner site. Just help me with this. I'm seeking to understand, do you oppose the provision of more housing in this area, or do you support it?
I support it as long as it's supported by the local community.
But in principle, so far as you are concerned, is the provision of new housing in this area something that you personally support or oppose?
As long as the area can sustain it, if there's new housing coming in, then obviously we need to look at not just the immediate area, but the infrastructure it will need to support. Of course, I want to see new housing come in. I know I can see the problem with homelessness. Within the Ward's Corner scheme, we're only looking, our restoration plan is only looking at the immediate site of the Ward's store and the market. But we have got a wider plan for the area. We want to start with the Ward's store, but then we can see ourselves working with other organisations to actually develop even the rest of the Ward's site. So our site could include housing beyond what we have planned for the immediate future.
Yeah, I mean to cut you off. Yeah.
Of course, there's other ways to create new housing, to create more housing. One of them is to intensify the housing that's already there. So there are other opportunities apart from building 23-storey tower blocks.
So it sounds as if we share the view that the provision of new housing in the area is important. It's right, though, isn't it, that no planning application has been made by the coalition for a community scheme that includes new housing. I think that is right, isn't it?
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Right, well, I'm not going to ask the question again. The last point I want to make, please, is just this, just to touch on this. And so it's just a reference for you, if I may. Ms Isherwood referred to deliberate dereliction earlier in her evidence in chief. Can I just sir, ask you in due course to look at section 8.8 of Mr Kiddle's evidence, which gives his view of this point. 8.8 at pages 24 to 25. Ms Isherwood, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you, sir.
Do you want to comment on that evidence of Mr Kiddle's? Do you recall, or do you want to have a look at that paragraph?
If you could show it to me, I'd be very happy to read it.
I think having
Tobias will bring over a copy.
Thank you.
So, yes, obviously Granger thought they would be able to move in, sweep in and carry out their plan much quicker than they have been able to. So the fact that the two houses on Suffield and Inkwell Printers have been left just shows how Granger's ambitions have just been delayed slightly.
Was there any? Did you want to follow up at all?
No, thank you.
On this point, right?
In terms of dereliction, it's not just Granger that's added to the blight. It's the fact that it's this 43 years of leaving the building unoccupied has added to the blight. I mean, it's not surprising that people look at it and think it just needs to be bulldozed. Because it looks... I mean, when I first moved here, I just looked at this extraordinary building and wondered then why it was tinned up and what was going to happen to it, because surely no one would leave a building like that tinned up. And then it turned out it had already been like that for 30-something years before I moved here. So, of course, there's been blight. And Transport for London has been asked over and over and over again to use the building. And I don't understand at all the inner machinations of a huge bureaucracy like that. But something has gone ever so wrong in the years since 1973 to allow this area, my home now, to be just left festering, waiting for something to happen. We've got something that can happen. We've got plans, and we want to bring it into the 21st century.
Well, as you know, Ms Isherwood, I don't act for London Underground Limited, and so I can't take that further. Thank you.
Thank you. So just on that point, your point about deliberate neglect was, I took it in the first place, directed primarily at the Wards building. although Mr Kiddle has dealt with the question of empty properties in Suffield Road and other parts of the site. I don't really want to sort of invite you to speculate beyond what would be helpful, but the point about the Ward's corner building is that the neglect goes back a lot further than Granger's involvement. Are you aware of any reasons why there would have been any reason to keep it deliberately empty or neglected before the mid-2000s?
It's a mystery to me. I mean, not what Granger has done, but why Transport for London in particular didn't see the value of their site and couldn't choose to exploit it. I mean, there were many, many offers to use the building over the years, so they had nothing to lose. But also, it is what developers do. I mean, as Spurs have done it, for sure, by buying up property, allowing it to go derelict. It happened I mean, Liverpool was another classic one, around Liverpool Football Club, where it's on record that they deliberately blighted the area to enable their stadium plans to go ahead. So it does seem to be a part of a pattern to keep things looking bad.
Thank you, Ms Isherwood. I've got no further questions for you. Thank you very much indeed.